Hello and welcome to the Untitled Car Show. I'm your host, Ike. Today we have a call-in episode. We have 4 fantastic guests. I believe everyone's actually been on the show before, but if not, we'll figure it out pretty fast. So we have Thomas, a.k.a. G-Body Man. We have GTP Johnny. He is from the Blown Pistons podcast. We have B-Man76, no W.S. Black something Hood. That's Blake, and then we have Dalton, or the Camaro boy, on opposite line. Everyone, it's a pleasure to have you on this evening.
Howdy.
Thank you.
Nice to be here.
All right.
Pleasure being here.
It's a pleasure to have you all. Everyone's been on before, right? Or am I misspeaking here? If you haven't been on the show, say something right now. See, there we go. Everyone's been on the show, or someone's just extremely slow. So, dead air, that's the most perfect thing for a podcast. So, I know we've run through a lot of the silly stuff before going on the show, if everyone's been on before. So now this is really tasking me to come up with some hard-hitting questions for you all to go over. So I believe the first and foremost question we'll go over is everyone excited for the new season of Top Gear coming up?
No.
No, not really.
No one's excited for Roy Reed? I'm kind of excited. I think it'll be good.
I'm extremely excited.
I think I'm more excited to watch the Grand Tour than Top Gear.
Yeah, the Grand Tour was good, but I don't think it was quite as good as we all hoped it was, right?
Right, but
I think by the end of the season, it was solid. It wasn't peak old Top Gear, but it was good old Top Gear.
Well, even my fiance, who's not car savvy, was all like, "It's not a bad show." So
I'm fearing the repeat of next season because it seems like they needed the restraint a little bit more, and I don't know. Looking at it now, maybe the producers are onto something. Now, whoever stuck their finger into Top Gear last season had no idea what they were doing. But the fact that it's, Chris Harris, Roy Reed, and Joey from Friends, that kind of makes me a little excited, right? We don't have the dead weight kind of hanging on. So, no, just me and Thomas over here.
My biggest issue with Top Gear is honestly how difficult it is to watch in the U.S. if you don't have cable. That's what keeps me from watching it for the most part. It ends up being you have to try and torrent, find a backdoor way to torrent it, or try and convince the BBC website that you're in another country, which doesn't work 90% of the time, or wait, a huge delay of time, and so it kind of ruins that whole experience for me. Just being such a pain to find in, to watch.
Well, it's true because it's very difficult for the most part to watch any real quality automotive programming, whether it's the Top Gear or if it's like auto racing. It's very hard to do that in the United States. If you're trying to watch like World Rally Car, or you're trying to watch Formula One or whatever, it's always either on like bullshit channels and like it airs for an hour on Fox Sports 1, and then it's an hour on Fox Sports 2, and then it's live streaming over the internet for a bit, and then it comes back onto Fox Sports. It's like they just can't make it easy where we could just sit down and watch an actual full race. I don't get why that's the way. A prime example to that for me was the Daytona 24 this year.
They had the IMSA stream up, and then about an hour or two into the IMSA stream, it went down, and I was trying to figure out what happened, and on Twitter it came up and said, "Oops, that stream wasn't even supposed to be up in the U.S. at all, and you guys just kind of got an accidental bonus hour or two of the online IMSA stream that wasn't for the U.S." So that really was extremely frustrating because IMSA is actually usually pretty good about streaming their events online, but in the case of the big events like Daytona 24, it's hard to find a good stream of it other than just playing in cars and listening to Radio Le Mans, which is fantastic. I mean, you can't beat Radio Le Mans commentary, but why can't I see the live stream? I don't care if there's ads in it. I mean, that's the thing. Like, if they would show the TV stream and leave all the ads in, I'd be perfectly fine with that, and I don't see why they don't do that in a sense.
Mm-hmm. Well, it kind of goes back to, I've always had this idea of if there was a sports bar somewhere in the U.S. where, like, you could go watch all the weird automotive sports that, like, you don't get elsewhere in this country, I think that thing would do fantastic because I go to Buffalo Wild Wings, on the weekend during football season to watch football games because I don't have the sports package to watch my Chicago Bears, and there's all those weird rules. I can't imagine all the weird Formula One freaks or the IMSA guys and everyone who would come out of the woodwork just to go somewhere and watch like a good version of the race. Like some of the races, you might have to have sleeping bags and cots set out, but other than that, it should be fun, right?
I think there was a group here in the Portland area that would get together and go to like a pizza bar or pizza joint and stuff, and they'd be doing the Formula One.
Yeah, the Fastlane Classic Cars in St. Louis, which I don't live in St. Louis anymore, but they had a get-together on the weekends when they'd watch the tape delay of the F1 races on Fox Sports or whatever. So they'd have a get-together out there, car guys, at this used classic car dealership to watch the F1 race the next day on Fox Sports, which was cool. It's a good thing to kind of bring the community together and meet people.
Yeah, I'd be down for something like that if an event like that took place around me.
It's just so sad. I mean, because you think about right now, somewhere in the world is probably some amazing automotive races happening, right? Like whether it's drifting or rally or something's happening right now in the world, and we're not able to watch it, and that makes me so sad. Like all I want to do is get drunk and watch people in fast cars go fast. Maybe I have a problem.
No,
that's basically MAV TV, which is such a weird thing anyway. But they love all the weird sporting events, the grassroots stuff, which is fun to watch.
I would watch that too, but there's also the aspect of I remember, gosh, this is years ago now, but I was watching like ESPN like 6 or whatever, and they were showing the World Championship in hibachi, and it was like, if you have time to dedicate to a hibachi championship, because God knows that shit's impressive, like all those volcanoes and like shit coming out of onions. Yeah, that's fun.
Butterfly.
But on the flip side of it, it's like, you could be showing so much racing right now. Why aren't you showing racing? And I don't know. It's infuriating to me that that's the case. I'm sure if you look for it right now, there'd be some sort of auto racing going on somewhere in the world. And amateur stuff is fun. The like WRC stuff is fun. I mean, have you ever watched a bad auto race? Like, actually, anyone?
No, I can't say I have.
Yeah. It's, I mean, even the stuff you may not like I don't like watching NASCAR, for example, but you kind of like get drawn into it if you stay on that channel for too long, and it's such a shame that stock car racing is the only one that kind of gets the dedicated television time here in the States, when there's so much other stuff out there and available. So, I don't know.
Yeah, I think you're going to maybe hopefully get something where it gets better, because for a long time, though, it was hard to really tape stuff unlike a NASCAR race. Like drag racing is another one I wish they would improve the quality on broadcasting. But I get sick and tired of watching Top Fuel cars and watching the whole event in 20 seconds because they just show the passes.
But have you ever stood next to one?
Yes. Yeah.
I hear that's quite impressive when.
Oh no! Top Fuel and Funny Car. It's in person. It's kind of like I would say, like a lot of sports are, like baseball. And you think it's not very fun to watch on TV, like NASCAR. Being there in person is a whole nother experience, and it makes the sport way more fun than with the TV because you lose an element through the TV.
Yeah, but I do agree. I'd like to see the other classes that run at those events. That's the cool. I mean, that's the cool stuff.
Yeah, I'd like to see super stock pros. The Cobra Jets and the Copos, and the lower actual cars instead of the funny cars and Top Fuel. They're cool, but I'd still like to see the lower classes because I think a lot of the lower classes are still actual old vintage muscle cars still running too.
Yeah.
Well, not only that, but it's more relatable too. Like you're not. probably in this lifetime, going to afford $1 million dragster, but you could afford a $30,000 built-up Camaro. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's more relatable. It's the same way NASCAR's been going, trying to get away from that car tomorrow box and get the brand recognition back into the sport where the people, the fans can relate to what's actually being raced.
And that's what it's supposed to do. I mean, NASCAR was started with, you build a car and you sell it on Monday,
Yeah. And, up until probably the mid-'70s, they were still taking actual showroom floor cars and converting them.
Yeah, I mean, NASCAR should realistically, to me, be Aussie V8 supercars. That's what NASCAR should be based off of, that kind of a formula where it's a production unibody that's been, that's the base of the car, and everything else is custom, but it started out as a production-type unibody, which is what you're seeing in those superstock classes in NHRA, where it's a factory body in white that the powertrain is obviously out of, a crate setup. It's something completely different, but at least the body in white is a production part.
And I think that's where NASCAR lost its appeal to me was when, I think after Earnhardt's death is when you really saw the downhill until we got to the car tomorrow with the big wing and the ugly body where everything was just a sticker.
Come on, dude, that was so Rice.
Only one NASCAR looked good with the wing, and that was the Superbirds and Daytonas.
Yep, I agree.
Yeah, the other problem is that the motor technology, while the motors are technologically advanced, at the same time they are based off of small block Chevys and stuff that haven't been in production for 25 years.
Well, the current I know the current Chevrolet is nothing even remotely production because it's got the distributor up front. When's a Chevy ever had that?
Yeah, but
right.
I mean, Ford doesn't hardly build a cam and block motor anymore.
No.
And so why in the world does that motor have?
They're slowly getting there. We finally got fuel injection a couple years ago.
Yeah, but it's not a modern fuel injection setup.
No, it's still a throttle body.
An Edelbrock aftermarket style fuel injection setup.
Yeah, it's still a throttle body.
Why isn't NASCAR running aren't the Fords running Coyote based, motors and LS based motors in the Chevys, and Toyota I guess has the Tundra V8, which they run successfully in some of the off-road stuff, I guess.
Yeah.
But we're so far away from that. The cars have nothing to do with
it's kind of where I think that you get into that muddy area of trying to keep the competition at an even playing field.
Exactly. If they were to do that, I think we would see a dominant hand with one of the brands. Instead of that competition, that competitive edge there, I think we would see one brand just dominate everything.
Well, you say that, but I mean, you look at GT3 racing, balanced performance. You have Vipers running against Corvettes, running against Bentley Continental GTs, running against Ferrari 488s, against McLaren MP412Cs or whatever, the 650Ss or whatever it is. And when a Bentley passes a McLaren, that's never going to happen in real life, but it's happening out there on the track, and they can balance those cars to where they're competitive.
Yeah, that could be a route NASCAR could look at, but I think what comes down to for NASCAR is with racing every single weekend, they're trying to streamline the tech process where they're not having to do these adjustments at every track where, okay, we're going to run the same car, same rough engine on the same frame, so that way we can whip these 40 cars through tech in 10 minutes.
Yeah, but it kind of makes it a little disingenuous to call it a stock car then. And while I'm sitting here, we just had Caleb. If a rally car can do it, so can my Malibu join in the show as well. Say hi, Caleb.
Hello.
There he is. We're talking racing at the moment. I kind of I think that's the part of NASCAR racing I don't like is just it's like a Camry that says it's grounded to the ground. It's lying to you, and that's what you really don't appreciate about it because these cars aren't stock cars. So.
No, they haven't.
But you
really
can drive
stock cars
to the dealership and buy one.
Yeah, where do I get a 2-door Camry?
Right?
Didn't they have?
It was 96.
Hey, I'd buy that. I'm not gonna lie.
Well, can I get a Camry that has a couple hundred horsepower?
And rear-wheel drive.
Right now,
Yeah.
I think the Chevrolet's the closest. Yeah, the Chevrolet's the closest to the actual production car.
Yeah.
There's not a production
What
part
the
of the thing.
At least it has the same-ish engine, the same amount of cylinders.
It's a rear-wheel drive performance car, unlike the Fusion and the Camry.
But it's not a
Right.
car because
Yeah.
With a
Chevy.
4-speed rock crusher transmission and an SPC-based V8. Yeah, no.
So it's not. It's the closest. It's not close. It's the closest between the.
yes, that's more.
In layout, yeah.
Speaking of NASCAR,
It is an car.
Yeah.
Has anybody been on RacingJunk.com recently and noticed that roller cup cars are hilariously inexpensive?
They've been that way for a long time. Yeah, they're dumb cheap.
The only
I was
ones
just
that are
thinking
worth
if
money are the road race cars because those are the only ones you can really use in a vintage series.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, you could take the wedge and whatnot out of the oval track cars, drop in something like 350, 290 with a hot cam or something, and just dominate at track days, provided you do your research.
Yeah, or you could
I
buy
know.
a
I think
used
that's a lot
Radical.
more entertaining than like, a Lotus Elise or something like that.
It's. So what do you think then, since we're kind of sitting on this race topic, what do you think is the closest to real life racing in terms of like a professional level event? Like, is it GT3? Are we talking about Le Mans series being closest to like real life analogs, or is it like?
I think Lemons probably, in my opinion, because you're taking real cars. You're still taking real cars and, you know, throwing safety gear into them and running them. You're running real cars, you know.
I would actually really love to see a professional level Lemons racing series. Like I don't know what that would look like, but that would be amazing.
The Continental Tire would probably be one that's close because I think
that's
they're
a
still
really
taking.
good one.
I think they're still taking production. I think still taking production cars and adding their cages and safety equipment to them.
Does IMSA still have the American Iron series? Haven't been following lately.
I don't. That's such a weird sidekick series, but I understand what you're talking about.
Technically pro, but it's probably as close as you'll get to stock.
Well, I think the Continental Tire is kind of what that's become, and that's watching the 350Rs race with the Z28s and some Miatas and stuff are all in that in the different categories.
Yeah.
That's really interesting to watch.
Yeah. Yeah, that's as close as we'll probably get.
Mm-hmm. Has anyone here participated in one of the Spec Mazda Miata racing series? Because I've always heard that's a good like entry level to professional racing for Americans. So.
I have online. Does that count? iRacing for the win, I guess.
Yeah, I guess.
I think that's a resounding no.
Yeah, so it's such an interesting idea. I mean, I assume everyone here has done like the typical, like maybe autocross, rallycross stuff. Has anyone done anything above and beyond that?
High school donut competitions in our gravel parking lot.
Yeah.
We had those too, but there was no cars involved.
Does a skid pad based drift day count?
That's not even a sport.
Yeah, that's just fun.
I mainly just drag race. That's about the only thing on a bigger professional or actual event. Never have autocrossed a car.
Well, the drag racing is interesting. I mean, what car did you drag race in?
My 14 Camaro SS.
A quarter mile or eighth mile?
Quarter.
Is it? It's something that I've always wanted to get into doing is drag racing at least once, especially in the old Blue Bomber Volvo. Just because it would just be so stupid to do it. That first run down the lane, do the walls feel like they get closer as you get faster?
No. It depends. Like I said, really with drag racing, it depends on your cars, your sense of speed. In the 14 Camaro, trap at 115 miles an hour, it's like, it's still, you don't realize you're going that fast. I've had my 68 Camaro, my old Ford pickup at 90, 95 miles an hour, and that's scary. But no, I think that for my first pass was more of not sleeping at the light and looking like an idiot taking off.
Yeah, because I don't know, drag racing with the tree and with the timing and everything. It's like the nicest thing about autocross is they say the light will go green and then just go whenever you're ready. It's not like they time you on that reaction time. Like that's like, I think that's where my manhood would be measured. I don't care if I'm racing a Nissan Leaf or whatever. Like that reaction time. That's like, oof, I don't want to be the slowest guy doing that.
Yeah, well, what's nice with like if you go where it's more comfortable setting is if you go like here in Portland during the summers, Friday and Saturday nights are just a run what you brung type open strip night where it's just a more casual setting. You're not running for points. You're not running a bracket system. It's just you line up, they drop the lights, and you make your pass. You're just running against yourself. Where you hit instead of bracket racing, that's the one that really screws with your reaction time when you have your handicaps involved and lights are dropping at different time settings between the two lanes.
Yeah, I don't know. That's somehow more intimidating to me than any other form of racing. Like, just I don't know why. Just drag racing just seems to be that way. I don't know. I had a thought and then it went away. I was doing two things at once, which is always a problem with me. I can hardly do half a thing at once. So, I don't know. It's interesting. So, we talked a little bit about the racing, about getting into it, and then the drag racing, and then, this is where I wanted to go. We talked about TV shows a bit. I'm curious if anyone has a least favorite car-related television show.
Epic Drives.
Specifically on television or YouTube as well?
You can do YouTube as well. I will accept a YouTube video. I'm not familiar with Epic Drive. You're going to have to fill me in on this while we're...
Basically, Epic Drives is this guy's driving around in some nice car going on these drives, but it's I'm feeling like, it's a car show going into it, but it's more about like a bunch of side stuff. Like he was going around the bayou talking about gators and stuff, and it's like, but the car, where's the car? And finally he gets back to the car, and then Randy Popes is on it too, and he's lapping the car. It's like, there we go. There's some car stuff, but
not car centric enough, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Anyone else? Least favorite car program?
Anything Hager Garage style.
Hockey puck lowering kit.
I'm not familiar with Hager Garage. What is that?
I believe that's it's just think like Real Housewives, but in a garage.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It's a reality show.
They do some really dumb stuff, like slam a car on hockey pucks, and just they take a Ford Focus and make it completely undrivable, and just stupid modification stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm trying to pull it up, and I pulled up images, and it's giving me circuit breakers for some reason. I think I typed in something wrong.
It's like those things that you and your friends always joke about doing to cars, except some gave them money and put them on camera.
Is it on TV or is it on YouTube?
It's on the YouTube.
I'm going to have to look this up. Is it as bad as... I hope it's as bad as y'all promise. Yes.
I'm going to chime in here.
Okay.
The thing that I guess sets Haggard Garage apart is that you look at all the stuff on like Velocity Channel and whatnot, and the level of staginess and just general crap and we're missing the part. This is going to be a disaster. We're way over budget and that sort of stuff. In reality, all they're missing is like a thermostat gasket or something like that. And stupid and trivial and false sense of drama, lots of noise and whatnot for no reason. You get a sense that these are just some guys in a garage with some dumb ideas versus this is sort of a fabricated idea of what being a car guy looks like. So I'm going to actually go out and say pretty much any of those sort of generic cookie cutter shop build TV shows, because they just aren't great. They're sort of, it's not really accurate or anything.
The worst of which being Fast and Loud.
Oh, I was going to make a
Gas
comment on that.
There, I was trying to think of the name. I watched it twice.
That needs to go away. I was stuck at a tire shop one time waiting for my tires to be rotated, and that was on TV, and I was just hiding in a corner trying not to listen to it because they're just so dumb.
And the sad thing is that Aaron, the guy with the beard,
He's good.
he knows what he's doing. He's sharp. It's
And he's gone.
Richard is just infuriating.
that guy. You just when you see him, you want to deck him.
Yeah.
This is true.
Well, and the thing is, they play up the bad like stereotypes of car guys.
Yes,
Especially him, and they take advantage of trends that are annoying, and they escalate them to horrible levels. Like I remember when it first came out, they built a Ford. Built is a strong word. They built a Fairmont, an old Ford Fairmont, and all they did was strip everything out of it, chrome wrap it, put a big extension on the handbrake, and they called it a drift car. And then they brought in a professional drifter who couldn't drift it because it was such a piece of crap. It was hilarious. It was like it proved how completely garbage, their premise was.
Okay,
they're not
but
building
I
cars;
disagree.
they're slapping branding on their vehicles.
I disagree a little bit. I do disagree a little bit. The Falcon, with that Aaron built for himself, that was badass, and that looked like a solid build. And I think he still.
yeah.
has
Like I
that.
said, Aaron knows what he's doing. It's mainly when Richard has to get involved and dictate the build style is where it gets bad.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, they're just so caught up in branding. That's part of my problem with it.
Yeah,
Branding pays the bills, though.
I think I don't know if you heard he's left that garage.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know if you guys know Death Fiero, the guy who built that car.
Yes.
He actually made it to the final round of the interview process to replace him, but they ended up going with somebody else.
The
Probably
Richard,
good choice in the long run because I wouldn't want Mike saddled with Richard. Too good of a guy for that.
Yeah, the way I was understood is talking to some people off air about Richard is he's more interested in being famous than he is in being a car guy. Like he just wants. It's not about the money. It's not about the cars. It's not about a thing. He just wants people to know who he is, almost akin to a reality show star. Like he does. He works on the Dodge commercials now, which is the weirdest damn thing to me. So. Like,
Well, it's a reality show. It's not a car show. I mean, that's the
we
problem
got to
with
have
it.
the different. Yeah.
He's like the Soulja Boy of automotive entertainment.
that's an insult to Soulja Boy. Come on now.
Thank you.
Soulja Boy's not that entertaining, not that annoying. Yeah.
But if you want to go back in time, I'd say Pimp My Ride for sure. I didn't mind.
Yeah.
some
No.
of the
That's a
customizing
gift to
things.
humanity.
I didn't.
Yeah,
I didn't
I don't
mind
know what you're
some of their
talking about.
I didn't mind
Didn't
some
everyone
of the
want their
customizing
cars from?
things.
Didn't everyone want their cars to look like from Need for Speed Underground 2?
Are you kidding?
Right?
TVs in your
Oh,
bumper?
don't
You don't want TVs in your bumper?
Don't forget the dog food dispenser because you have your dog with you all the time. Or a net thrower.
I heard you like X, so we gave you X on your X. Yeah, whatever it is.
It's like Pimp My Ride and some elements of Haggard Garage are just so bad and half thought out, and why would you do that sort of stuff? That they're
Like, why
really
have a fish tank in
entertaining.
your car?
And
but see, Pimp My Ride was honest in a way that
yeah,
it was never pretended that it was a car show in a sense. It was,
No.
and the cars that they were starting with were so bad.
yeah.
That, yeah, what they ended
really
up with was
couldn't-
bad, but
yeah.
who cares? Like,
At least there was the entertainment value.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't feel worse about myself after watching it. I mean, I feel like a lost IQ, but beyond that, it's
You feel like
Yeah.
you've wasted
Oh.
time, not lost brain cells.
exactly. Yes, that's more accurate.
I'll put Street Outlaws in that category.
yeah.
Oh, that's the fake drag racing underground whatever thing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
for street racing, that street's awfully well prepped and well
Yeah.
I
lit.
mean, I couldn't get into
And
it.
untrafficked.
Yeah,
I
and
couldn't do that.
their street cars look a lot like a Pro Mod anymore.
Because they are.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
Pro Mod guy was at Gateway when I was out. Was at Gateway International Raceway or Gateway Motorsports Park in St. Louis when I was out there for the summer, and he got whipped. It was funny.
Oh, what was that? There was I think National Geographic did a documentary on street racing in L.A. and they had this shop, and these guys were just mouthing off saying they were the fastest thing on the street, and they finally took their car to an actual drag strip and got their butts handed to them by everyone that actually was legit.
It's amazing how much people don't realize, like, how much time and effort goes into a proper drag car. Like, slicks and all that shit. Like, it doesn't work on the street because it's too fast for the street, you know? Before we get too far... Before we get too far away from Pit My Ride, one of my favorite facts of that, though, is apparently the lawyers, after they gave the cars to the people, would come in and make them take shit off of the cars because it wasn't street legal. So you'd come in, you'd see this car, and they'd be like, it's got a giant TV in the back. And you're like, oh, that's cool. I don't need a giant TV in the back, but at least I could take it out and put it in my house. And the lawyers would come in like, no, we need that out, and we're just going to take that with us. Sorry, have a good one. And you just have a giant hole in your car. Like, this is some bullshit. I can't
I've
imagine
always
having
been a
your
fan.
car destroyed by those guys and then even more ruined somehow afterwards.
I was more a fan of overhauling.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
I respect.
Yeah, that
Yeah,
was a
if-
great show and did a lot of great things. But if my car ever was on that, I would have probably died because that's not my style.
What was the premise there? I'm not
If they
familiar.
could keep Chip Foose's wheels off of the cars, they would be okay.
It was a family, and the premise was a family. Like family would call and saying, you know, you're down on your luck or can't afford or some story, and your car needs to restore. The original premise was they would basically like stage your car getting stolen
Mm-hmm.
and put you through hell for the next 7 days, restore the car, and then give the car back.
So what's that, like, home makeover meets, like, Pit My Ride meets just...
Punk.
Yeah, except they actually built good cars on overhauling.
Yeah.
Yeah, because Chip Foose
Hey,
was
don't be
involved.
dissing Pit My Ride now.
It was like Monster Garage meets Punk.
Yeah, a bit.
Yeah.
With quality.
Like, there was some really good work put in there. And
Yeah, but it wasn't.
the
quality,
owner
it
was
wasn't-
like, hey, your car's been stolen.
Yeah, I
wasn't
think
so
the worst
quality.
one is they stole a '56 Chevy two-door sedan, but it was so rough they had to go buy another. They ended up having to buy two cars to put one car together. So they like took the bad stuff off the first car of the guy and like put it in a parking lot, lit it on fire, and told the guy his car got burned.
Shit happens.
Oh, yeah, there was times where like you would see them on the hidden camera and you'd be like, that guy is legitimately crying over the vehicle being gone. Like, it was my dad's car, and
That's
you know
terrible.
it was.
Yeah, by I think like the midway through the show's span is then they started actually just letting the owners in on it.
Yeah,
Because I think one of them was like,
I feel like lawyers
Going
will start
around
to
with
get
the
pissed after
shotgun.
long enough. Yeah.
well, I think
they got Chip Foose. They actually ended up doing that to Chip Foose's own rig. The team they stole Chip Foose's own pickup and fixed it up for him.
yeah, I saw that episode. That was a really good episode.
That was a really good one, but I think that's when they're like, maybe we shouldn't steal that person's rig.
Yeah.
Well, I think too people were starting to like with the advent of the information age, people would, instead of calling the number of the quote-unquote detective, would call like the police non-emergency line and then be like, wait a minute, this guy's saying my car is stolen, and then it's not. Is it really stolen? And this person is saying this, and watch overhaul. I think it was just getting to the point where people were either figuring it out or probably sending the real police after the overhauling crew. So
Yeah.
It also became a little too formulaic. I mean, just like anything else, it gets old. After you've seen Chip Foose do Chip Foose things to, two-tone everything, it gets a little old. I liked the show, and I liked a lot of the builds. They were very Chip Foose, so yeah, two-tone everything, big wheels. But they were all savable. They were well done. That was the difference.
He did some really, and for 7 days, they did some pretty radical, on some of those cars, some pretty radical custom work. They did that, like that mid-'80s El Camino. They grafted the whole front nose of a 67 Camaro onto it, and the dash and all. I'm like, for 7 days, that's a really good work.
Yeah.
They
also had a huge production crew on that. They had a lot of guys involved, which is
they had
modern
that
car
A-team.
shows don't seem to.
Yeah.
Well, since we're talking about Chip Foose, does everyone have a favorite current designer of vehicles, like along the lines of Chip Foose?
Speaking of Chip Foose,
I sort of do.
Probably
I would
Ian
have to
Callum.
say Chip.
Ooh, Ian Callum's great for the new stuff,
Yeah.
in terms of new cars. In terms of reimagining old cars, my favorite's probably Troy Trepanier.
That's a good choice.
Well, what has he done? I'm trying to think of his work.
Everything that comes out of the shop is just gold. He did Sniper. It was that Plymouth Savoy with the Viper V10.
Did he do a Buick with an Infinity motor in it?
Yeah, he did the Fast Forward Fastback for SEMA. A couple of Barracudas.
He did that Chicane, which was that was about 10 years ago. That '62 Chevy Biscayne that was everywhere in the early 2000s.
How about the Ring
We
Brothers?
finally finished First
Nah.
Love. That was wow.
Ring
rough.
Brothers are falling into that billet is the end of the world thing, and it's really getting annoying. I liked their initial builds, but they've got
Their craftsmanship's just amazing. But yeah, I've never liked the style.
Last year, I do believe they're still from Wisconsin, but last year I got to be up and close to their carbon fiber body Mustang, and I was just like, oh my god. Pretty.
Oh yeah, I can't argue with their craftsmanship. It's fantastic, but their
And
style is a little iffy sometimes.
I like how they build it to go fast. Like whatever they build works.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard. For me, I'm not a big fan of modern trends. I'm very traditional hot rodder and custom guy. So there's not really very many guys out there still doing that. There's a few small shops, but not very many doing traditional lead work and classic 50s, 60s customs. I've never been a big fan of big wheels and high-tech suspensions in a hot rod.
The one case where big wheels look good on like 60s, 50s, 70s, whatever cars is those clapdoor Continentals on those 20-inch Detroit steel wheels. Because, wow.
There's times where I can look at one where I like and appreciate and I like it, but I don't see myself owning one. But like there's just no good builders today. I'm a fan of like George Barris's early stuff, Cushenberry, the Alexander Brothers.
Yeah, you have to go back to the very early stuff for Barris to be worth anything, because Barris became such a joke.
It's Barris when his brother Sam worked for the shop until about mid, I think 57, 58 when he left.
Yeah.
But that stuff was that's more my style, customs, and we own one and this is a show car, so I just like that style.
Mm-hmm.
No Jonathan Ward, anyone? No Icon Motor or 4x4? Nothing?
Too expensive.
Well, I mean, I don't know if you consider that a designer, because in that case, Singer, is going to be that whole shop, and is going to be the best, because Singer Porsche is just unreal. but
Yeah.
I don't consider
True.
that to be necessarily an independent designer necessarily because they're working off of
That's
something.
just a
and
group
that's-
of cultists.
Well, and that's kind of why I didn't say some of those shops kind of thing, because they're modifying existing cars. They're not a true designer from scratch, I guess, which is why I said Callum.
Mm.
But
Yeah.
I get that.
Yeah,
You're saying you're cutting the line between making a good car great and taking something and making it into something else. I mean, there's a very fine line between like what, I guess redesigning something into something else as opposed to just making something perfect. Like that sort of that kind of delineates the line for you, or between like
yeah, well, I think and from blank sheet design is something different. It means a lot to me because I'm an architect. I'm an architectural intern. I graduated from design school, so when you designing something from a clean sheet is different than trying to, make some little tweaks here and there to make something look a little better. Somebody had to come up with the car from the get-go. When the Ring brothers make a Mustang look really good, well, it's because Ford made the Mustang look good in 1964, and then the Ring brothers made it look cool and modern. They didn't start with a blank sheet.
Now, like in terms of like Bears and stuff, where do you see like they start with like the 49 Mercury and then or a 55 Chevy, and they chop the top and they pull headlights off of a different car and the taillights off of a different car and the different trim. They started with something, but when they're done, you don't know what they started with really, unless you know what you're looking at.
Mm-hmm.
Now, where do you see that as in like the design?
Yeah, that's a little different. I would. And that early 50s custom scene is different than a lot of modern stuff because you had some fabrication knowledge that just doesn't seem to exist as much anymore. You also had simpler cars to start with.
Yeah, the premise was, I couldn't afford a Cadillac or anything, but I'm going to take my Chevrolet or my Ford and make it look like a brand new Cadillac and elegant. Mm-hmm. Until you get to like the Barris of the 60s and stuff where everyone was using round rod and sheet metal and getting really high.
Yeah.
You get some of the really wild stuff of the 60s where there's a lot of freehand.
Yeah. Why can't I think of the other custom guy from the 60s who did all the crazy street rods?
Like Roth?
Yeah.
Daddy Roth?
Yeah.
Big Daddy Roth. Yeah.
I would say he was a designer since he was the first custom guy to really use heavily molded fiberglass and weird all out of that Orbitron and.
Ed Roth is definitely a designer. There's no doubt about that. I would definitely link him into
that. I'm just sitting here giggling to myself a little bit, going like, these call-in shows are super easy for me. You all just basically take care of yourselves. It's almost like childcare.
It's kind of amazing that we haven't started yelling at each other yet, but
Well, yeah, and we haven't.
We'll get there.
Throwing
We'll
out,
get there.
Toyota engine codes yet, because that's
we don't need to do that dick measuring yet.
That's Ike's favorite show.
I have to. Oh, can I tell you? So I had to learn. So I have the Nissan motor. So my last month has been trying to figure out engine codes to transmission codes for Nissans, and I've just been wanting to kill myself. So I got a VG33E motor, and does that work with the one from a Nissan 300Z? Well, that came with a VG30 motor, but that's the NT. I'm like, too much numbers. I'm just going to find an adapter plate. It's not worth it. It's easy just to build something than to learn something.
There comes a point where,
That's why small block Chevy is always the answer, or LS is always the answer, because everything bolts to it.
And it fits in just about everything.
Well, if I could have got one of those for $100, I would have, but I got the Nissan motor for $100, so that's how that works. So,
but then you'll have to dump in another $1,000 in peripherals to get it to work.
No, that's the great thing is I got all the wonderful. He ripped all out of a Nissan Frontier, and I got all the electronics and everything to go with it, so I'm good to go. So hopefully, we'll
What about
see.
the transmission?
The transmission, I'm going to buy. So I bought the engine for $100, and I'm getting a Nissan 300 something and some blah blah number thing that's supposed to work according to the internet. So I'm sure it won't.
It should bolt right up because it's a VG motor and a trans was originally going on a smaller VG motor, so it's just the same as sort of a transmission from a 305 going onto a 350. It's basically the same thing as that.
It should work, but this is the internet, and this is how that works. If it's on the internet, it's fake transmission news. I think is what's going on there. So. Oh man. Hopefully it's gonna be a good thing. So the motor will be $100, and then the transmission is gonna cost me $80 in a little bit of time. So I think it might be the cheapest motor swap in history. Is it what?
That's going in the Blue Bomber, right?
Correct. Yeah. Because the current motor no worky, I need to buy $2.30 worth of parts to get it up and running. So I think the smart thing to do is just pull that whole motor and throw a new one in. That's the logical thing.
That's my kind of math right there.
You need to buy a spare diff, weld it up, throw in a hydraulic e-brake, and learn to drift, because those 740s are great platforms for that, weirdly enough. There's a guy, Drifts and Lifts, he really sort of started that whole thing in North America, and yeah, it's a great platform,
If by great platform you mean long wheelbase, then yeah.
Oh yeah, it's so
that's about
stable.
it. Okay, but that's anything with a long wheelbase is going to be that way. If you're going to, you can drift anything.
Also, the steering geometry is really, really nice in terms of not a lot of bind under full squat. You can really hold the lock without really having any issues there, which I know people who have been running into that with Mustangs. So
it is weird how stable a car that's 26 years old plus is at over 100 miles per hour, allegedly. Like, I was not the car looks like it's about to fall apart, and before it actually did fall apart, running that thing 100 miles per hour all day, no problem. It's just nice and easy. So, it's probably the sketchiest car I've ever been the most comfortable in, which is weird. Like, I don't know. It's strange. There's a big difference between a 25-year-old European car and a 25-year-old American car, because I've been in some, like, Chevy Berettas at that same era where I'm like, this thing's about to catch fire. I need out of it now. Like, I don't know.
Yeah. That's everything in the when you get into the 80s from America.
This is a great question then. So, what is the worst car that you all have ever been in? And we'll kind of do this single file so we don't get too crazy here. So, Johnny, we'll start with you. What's the worst car you've ever been in or driven?
Worst or scariest?
Either. I'll accept either.
Okay. Long time ago, I used to work at an auto auction, so I got to taste many different flavors of the automobile. I ran into a Ford Tempo. It had a battery. It was dead, so I had to jump start it by myself, and it was also a 5-speed. So I had the battery box right up against the wheel because the battery was against the firewall, thank God. Plugged it in, jumped it, and mind you, I had one foot on the clutch. I throw the cables off, close the hood from the driver's side, get in, let the clutch all the way out, and I'm still sitting here at about 1K waiting for the clutch to engage. Mind you, clutch is all the way out, and I haven't moved. I could count to like 5 and finally started puttering away.
That's pretty bad. Was it every Ford Tempo I've seen has been some sort of weird pastel color?
It was. It was like pastel blue or something. I don't remember.
Part of the pastel is just because all the clear coat was gone, because 5 minutes after that car was new, all the clear coat was gone.
This is true. It's like Ford had the worst paint in the planet back then. I'm pretty sure it wasn't even paint. I'm pretty sure it was just like nail polish.
I don't know why you're specifying Ford, just the 80s in general.
It was probably the frosting from those like easy bake oven treats.
Yeah, most likely. Just like a Japanese bukkake of clear coat.
The host, everyone.
Hey.
My show, I get to say what I want. If I want to say Japanese bukkake, I could say it. Moving on from
That's
there,
why they rusted so fast. It was such a salty clear coat.
You might be onto something. This is worth investigating into. This is
No, it's not. No.
This is shortly after they teamed up with Mazda, so there might be something to this.
Oh God. Jesus.
Now they've made everyone comfortable listening in on the show. Blake, worst car / scariest car you've ever been in?
Well, there's kind of two. Owned by the same kid, my best friend. Worst car I've ever driven was his 1986 Oldsmobile Cutlass Sierra, which GM thankfully painted rust color from the factory, which hid the fact that it had a basketball-sized door in the hole in the door, which was nice. The steering wheel you could move it with one finger, and it just kind of did whatever it was going to do. There was absolutely zero feedback. But the most scary one to ride it was his Nissan hardbody pickup, which when you went over a bump, the suspension travel felt like it was at a diagonal, which was very disconcerting. So it would kind of bounce like left to right and up and down. And the shocks were terrible, so it would really bounce around for a long time after you hit a bump. It was bad, just terrible. Ugh, bad cars. He doesn't have cars anymore. He only rides bicycles, so that's been a good move for him.
That sounds like someone cutting the springs.
No, it was regular ride height. I replaced the rear drum brakes on the thing, but it was just old and screwed up. I don't know if the Panhard bar was, if it even had one. I don't remember what the rear suspension setup on those pickups was, but it moved left and right and up and down at the same time. It was very, very disconcerting.
Yeah, suspension geometry changing mid-drive is always kind of off-putting. I'm surprised Nissan, though. Probably just very poor maintenance.
Yeah, no, very poor maintenance. But it was a pickup, so it had a solid rear axle, so it was, it just kind of moved around. It was weird. I've never experienced anything like it.
Hopefully you'll never experience it again. Dalton, worst / scariest car?
Scariest car would have to been my former coworker. He moved out to where we were out in the Northwest, never owned a car. Bought his first car, was a 79 Dodge Aspen.
That's always a good start.
Yeah. Oh, it was reliable. I mean, you can't kill a slant six. But like typical 70s Mopar, the body was falling off around the slant six. And the scariest, when you'd hit a bump, you were hoping that the floor would not finally give out and you'd be going through it. Because it had to flex in the floor at that point because it was so rotted out. And if you threw something in the trunk, I'm surprised you never just threw something in there and have it fall right to the pavement because there was not much holding the trunk pan in. But
weight reduction.
The worst car I ever have driven would have to have been surprisingly, it was a 67 Camaro convertible. That was just a plain Jane stripped down base model, and that thing, it was weird. It's weird how night and day it is compared to my 68 Camaro in terms of ride. They're both, well, the 67 had no power steering, no power brakes, 2-something rear gear, and a straight 6 where my Camaro's got power steering, power brakes, factory discs. That 67 convertible was just a truck. And it wouldn't stop with those drums. I nearly totaled out, rear-ended my grandfather in his 34 Ford 5-window coupe coming down a hill because it wouldn't stop. Yeah.
Thomas, worst / scariest car?
Okay, so I've been thinking, there's a lot of scary things I've either ridden in or driven, but all of those are under really sketchy circumstances, except for one. There was this guy I knew, I think he'll remain nameless for now, just because the embarrassment would be too high. But he used to have a 98 Civic, and those $50 eBay coilover sleeves?
Like the ones to make it lower, or like actual coilovers?
No, just the sleeves, just the like slam it to the ground for $50 off of eBay sort of stuff.
Okay,
right?
I know what you're talking
With
about. Yeah,
springs and all that stuff.
like it's like a spring
Yeah, and apparently it
compressor.
wasn't low yeah, and apparently it wasn't low enough. So since they were just like fixed rate springs, he decided to cut them. So there was only about 4 inches of spring on each corner. Oh my god, that was bad. That was so bad.
It just bottom out everywhere and just.
Thomas, what's your daily driver? Sorry,
I was going to say, Thomas, I think we're lying here. We know what the worst car that you've ever driven is.
we know the worst car in this chat.
Yeah.
My daily currently is a 96 Crown Vic on G-body front springs, but dirt track front springs. And on the back, they're probably way too stiff. They're springs off of a
Probably.
69 Chevy C10 pickup. On the front there, they're in the back.
Wait, okay, so the C10. Let's see your show of hands for who likes the C10. All right.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah. So that's
And
the real
the
worst car
shock-
you've ever driven.
Yeah, and the shocks are junkyard units. They're Bilsteins from a town car. And the whole
That's probably the
it
least shitty
sounds
thing on the
so
car.
bad, but the whole setup
It is
it-
also
Because
so
it is
bad.
bad.
If it sounds
Because I
bad and looks
feel
bad and works bad, it is bad.
Yeah.
I still have travel, and it drips.
I hope so.
different was
I mean,
Wow,
it's not
this-
suspension if it doesn't.
On the
so-
bright side, the suspension's still suspensions, but beyond that,
This has now become an intervention.
We actually
It's
all
needed.
asked you here because we love you, Thomas, and we want to help you. It's a safe
buy a
space.
Malibu.
No, don't go do something silly like that. Yeah.
There's
It's
a
actually
nice,
you
there's
know,
a nice
I've
W-body Buick or something that would serve you so much better.
3800 series.
you have
Yes.
no idea how expensive W bodies are around here. Apparently,
No, they're not, dude. I just bought one.
that's because you are where you are. I'm in this little
I am-
place of about 114,000 people in Canada, and everybody drives.
114,000, there's 5,000 people in my town.
Man, I just
And there's-
picked up.
So you're
But
saying there's
everybody
not
drives an import here.
20,000
The
W-bodies?
cheapest-
And there's a V12 Jag for sale. I'll let
The
that sink
cheapest
in.
3800 engine W body on the local classifieds is $2,000.
That's
Yeah?
cheap.
Is that Canadian
cheap.
money or real money?
Yeah, if that's
Yeah,
Canadian money,
that's
that's like
Crown Vic.
$12.
That's like a pancake and a half-finished bottle
Crown
of
Vic
Jacks.
550 Canadian bucks and only required a $27 switch. So
Let's
Yeah,
hear it.
but it doesn't work.
And then what else did you do to it? And also
maybe more
why?
than I probably should have, but
Maybe? Probably? There's so many
like-
words that could be substituted for other words.
All right, so I bought my '99 Grand Prix GTP for $2,500, and I just picked up a '05 Grand Prix GTP for $3,500, and that has 135,000 miles on it.
oh, you're rubbing it in up here. It wouldn't be so bad if the insurance premiums weren't terrible.
Oh, my, they're not that bad.
Well, not in America. They wanted me because with my truck I had beforehand, which was also come to think of it, I ruined most of my cars.
Okay, glad we agree on something.
But I do it for very entertaining reasons.
Our own entertainment, yeah.
Yeah. That was with I think it was 2.8 mil in liability, which of course you have to have because it's government-owned insurance in a no-fault state. Blah 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 blah.
Socialism.
Yeah. So it was, which I hate because it should be a private semi-private, at least semi-private market for that sort of stuff. Because if you can only get your base coverage from one source, you're going to get screwed anyways. But that's another thing. But with like 2.8 in liability and $300 deductible on just the windshield, it was $3,800 a year.
I mean, Freedom
96.
Land is just south of you, and
And
we have
also
W
northwest.
bodies. everywhere.
Yeah,
so.
but I'd probably, given my last name and my heritage, I'd probably end up getting sent back to the wrong country. So
You're Canadian, though, so you'd probably get in. You'd be fine.
I think I'll politely decline.
Sorry.
Yeah.
You're in Canada, then any country you get sent back to is better than Canada.
Oh.
Oh! Hi there, Jake.
Also, hello, everybody.
Yeah, no kidding.
Oh my!
I thought
Nice
that was a
to see
sweet,
you.
sultry sound to your voice.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. I've graced you all with my presence finally. I actually catch one of these things.
Yeah.
That's no good. Wait, we were talking about shitty cars, so...
Yeah.
Oh,
Hey,
well, my
perfect
calling.
timing.
Yes, hello. I consider myself a connoisseur of shitty cars.
You're
This
not.
is
You're none of
something.
those things except shitty.
Skype
I was
doesn't
gonna say I did not call your NA Miata the worst car that I'd ever ridden in. So it was
Yay.
fun. It was sketchy, but it was fun.
Well, you just haven't ridden in the Mustang yet, because I'm sure that will take the title very easily.
Well,
Is that still
I've seen the
Zeph's
Mustang.
car, or is that your car?
Just avoid crowds, please.
No. I mean, it's a
It
V6.
can't make enough speed to hit anybody with any force. So
Yeah, I don't think I could get over the curb if I tried.
Just watch out for sand. Some of you will get that.
yeah.
What were we at? What were you guys actually talking about in here?
Shitty cars.
Well, we
Shitty
talked about
cars.
shitty cars, and then we got to Thomas G-Body Man, and then we decided to stage an intervention against his car. I'm using air quotes.
Atrocity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Car in quotation.
Oh, are we talking about his Crown Vic?
The 17.7-foot embarrassment.
There you go.
Yeah.
All I ask is that you stop calling it the Slamther until it's actually slammed. If it's drivable, it's not slammed.
It
Well,
has
we've
like,
already questioned its drivability, so
it has 2 inches of effective ground clearance. Does that count as slammed?
That's 2 inches too
No,
much.
I was just gonna, you beat me to it by this much, Jake.
if you're not dragging frame, you're not slammed.
Yeah, if you still have a subframe, you're doing it wrong.
How does that regular car of yours go to bottom out over a Pop-Tart?
Yeah.
I'm not needed here. Goodbye, everyone.
Yeah, no
I was
kidding.
say,
We got this, Ike.
It's fine. I'm just going to go do laundry. The rest of you just
I think
watch
I
after
would have.
yourself.
I would have not called it the Slamther actually originally because I think Jake didn't I float. I forget who it was in here. I think it was. I thought it was you, Jake, but I floated the idea of like Crown Driftoria around for a bit, and I think
Well,
it
that
was
doesn't
you
work
But it's
either,
not.
because you don't
You
drift
can't
the
drift
stupidest
it.
thing I have ever
Yeah.
heard.
I
So it is
even
not.
It's on C10 shocks. You're not going to drift it.
It's
I
not
even
shot.
made you a logo.
Or C10's something from a C10. That takes away any
you-
credibility.
Man, you should just wrap that Ford badge with a Chevy.
Just call it the Red Rocket.
That's what I did. I just wrapped it.
Now I'm thinking of that South Park episode.
Oh, God.
What's sad is that you are remarkably close to a joke made slightly earlier this evening.
It's okay. I'm just,
Um,
telepathic and whatnot.
Yeah. What?
but actually, it's not bad. I mean, you got a good amount of pop.
It's pretty bad, dude.
Yeah.
For sliding about, it's not that bad considering what
It's got way too many Instagram tags to be good.
yeah.
Mm.
That's
So
the only way
I-
I'm getting my
what
Instagram
other-
out there. I have like maybe 4 friends who actually watch my stuff. So
So I was going to ask what Untitled Car Show is actually about, but it appears that it's about roasting Thomas's car.
hey,
It's
Or-
about
or-
whatever we want it to be about because that's why it has no title. It just changes every episode.
Shall we talk about something of substance?
Well, I
No.
think what we need to do now is I think we need to have a drift competition between Jake and Thomas at the very least here. Because if you're saying
As
his
long
In
as
the
car-
high
there's-
school parking lot.
If there's no poles, I'll do fine.
okay. I will,
sand.
once I weld the diff and throw in the Hydro E once I'm back in Ontario.
Well,
Yeah, I'll
that's
take you up
just
on that.
that's just changing the goalposts.
It's not changing the goalpost.
Say once I take my car and replace it with something good, I'll be fine.
Yeah, Jake.
Yeah,
he
but
just
I'll
needs
still be running
$50,000, and then his
So-
Civic will be so fast.
Oh, there's this. What I need to do is I need to buy a 350Z and put a twin turbo LS in it.
Yeah.
I'm so lost right now. What the hell are we talking about anymore?
Drifting,
I
apparently.
don't
I went to a drift competition in Oklahoma. It was the first one I went to. It was in Stroud, Oklahoma, and pretty much everyone there that was any good just had an LS dumped into some import. There was a
all the things.
there was a tube chassis 350Z with a twin turbo LS. There was a BMW 3 Series with a naturally aspirated LS. My buddy was there with his Nissan Silvia with a cammed LS. You notice a theme here.
Yeah.
Crate motors solve everything.
That's pretty much every car show I've been to ever is something with an
Hey
LS.
guys, guess what I did? I put an LS in it. Oh wow, okay.
Is it-
But seriously, isn't
original?
aren't drift events just fun?
Welcome to the Midwest United States, where every
Yep.
car show is a bunch of 50-year-old men with their meticulously restored cars that they paid another shop to do, and it's all wire-tucked, and it's all LSs, and it's all Camaros, and it's all Ford Thunderbirds.
Actually, the last car show I was at, which is the school I go to town in, 25 miles down the highway, Highway 60, there was a 1969 Ferrari GTO, some sort, maybe 69, that one guy has apparently kept in his garage for the past however many years. And then there was a Bentley that showed up. And keep in mind, like, all the towns around here are 5,000 to 8,000 people.
Yeah.
But we have the highest concentration of millionaires in the U.S. because farmers and other shit. It's insane.
Now, in defense of Midwesterners, when I did the opposite lock meet and we crashed a car show event going on in, I forget the name of the small town. It was GM Nationals night there, but there was still Citroens and Morgan three-wheelers, and there was a couple Peugeots and some really random, goofy French, German, like, I think there was a couple Yugos even, like, rolling around. So there's some other weird stuff rolling around. You just got to know where to look for it, you know?
Yeah.
Now, that being said...
Yeah, there's no weird rolling around up here.
Yeah.
At least where I am.
Now, that being said...
Yeah,
when
you
I
live in
showed
a
up,
frozen wasteland.
Of socialism.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You missed that part. You missed the
Like, does
socialism.
a right-hand drive Camry count as weird? I don't know.
No.
I daily one, but that's not saying much.
It would be hilarious just for the fact of going through drive-thrus. That's all I would do with it all day. Is just confuse
Okay.
people.
Calm down there, Doug DeMiro.
But it's fun to go through drive-thrus with the thing on the wrong side. I wouldn't reverse through, though, because that'd just be silly. That's just dangerous.
Oh,
So,
I
no,
would,
you know
I
what's
would
I'm
fun?
totally
here.
reverse
It's
through.
a 15-year
You know what's
import.
fun? Putting your friend in the trunk and having them pay for it.
Oh, here's a story actually. So I've got a friend who likes to do crazy stuff with cars, and it's crazy
Zeph.
on an yes.
Yeah.
Some of you know who Zeph is.
I
One
do.
time he took a car out on a test run, and he had an ignition wire melt, and he needed me to come pick him up. And at the time, I was in my 1998 Honda Civic. It was me and my girlfriend and an enormous subwoofer taking him in the back seat. So effectively, it had two seats. Not thinking of this, I go to pick him up. When we get there, and it's like, oh, there's nowhere for you to sit. And my girlfriend jokingly suggests, oh, someone could just get in the trunk. And for those of you who don't know me, I'm 5'5" and 135 pounds. My friend Zeph's 6 foot, and my girlfriend's like 5'8". So I hopped in the trunk of my Honda Civic, and we drove 3 miles back to the tow truck that way. And at a stoplight, I figured out how to pop the trunk, and I popped it open and waved at the person behind. And they were talking on their cell phone, and I saw them drop their cell phone and go diving for it. and
That's winning right there.
I closed the trunk and immediately thought, oh, I hope they don't call the police.
Yeah. This person known for the many 100 horsepower W bodies that just shouldn't exist but do. They're interesting.
Yeah.
Yes, I know quite a few. I've been up to or close to in person with a several hundred. I want to say it's like a high 8-second Grand Prix.
Oh, is it the twin engine one?
No. This is ZZ Performance Dragster.
Oh, yeah.
Grand Prix.
Yeah,
they every year around Grand Rapids, Michigan, they host what's called a W Body meet. It invites all Regals, Monte Carlos Grand Prix, and that was a great show, man. And yeah, they showed up with it, and it's impressive.
Yeah. Isn't that thing running like 12-to-1 compression or something?
I didn't get I only had a couple seconds to talk to the guy because everybody was there around.
Yeah.
So, but.
Oh,
still,
no. It's not the compression. It had like a 9,000 RPM rev limit. That was it.
Yeah.
It's either twin charged or twin turbocharged.
It used to be. It's a big, very, very big single turbo now.
Oh, really? They change it every 5 seconds. It's hard to keep up.
Yeah, they've had a single turbo for, I think, past couple of years now.
Huh.
So.
Lots of power in a front-wheel drive car. That's always fun.
Yeah.
It is, though.
My I got mine tuned up a little bit. My pretty car is 90. That's probably around 300 or so. It's fun, but
The 99 Regal?
no Grand Prix GTP.
Oh, hey, another 3800 nerd and not alone.
Yep, I have it set up. I have it intercooled and lowered on coilovers. My exhaust cutout hangs about 2 inches off the ground, so that makes it fun, and also not very pleasant to drive daily. So I just picked up a 2005 Grand Prix GTP. So
I love that body
Listening
style.
to you two talk about W bodies is killing me inside.
Yeah, I left actually. I just came back. Like I heard W Bob, and I said, "This is going to be a while."
Asleep.
Yeah.
Let him go down that rabbit hole again.
yeah,
Let's talk about Firebirds. Yeah.
No.
Let's not talk about Firebirds.
You mean the redhead stepchild of the Camaro?
Ugh.
You mean
That accident.
The Camaro.
Says the guy ruining a Camaro. Anyway, moving on.
Let's talk about Fox Body Mustangs.
There's always Malibus.
Let's talk about regrettable automotive decisions.
Let's talk about Malibus. That sounds
Yes,
interesting
see?
and different and like something that an Untitled Car Show viewer would love to hear about.
No.
My dad had a 1987 Chevy Malibu station wagon when I was a kid.
That doesn't count because it's
That's a
interesting.
G-body. That's interesting.
It was brown. It was hideous, but it was a lightly modified 350 and would pick up one of the wheels when you floor it from a standstill.
Yeah, they make good drag cars.
It
There's
remains
a
the
lot
most.
of twin-turbo small block wagon G-bodies running around.
You want to know the depressing thing? You want to know what my dad replaced that with?
That Taurus?
Chrysler LHS.
I don't know
And
what
then
that is.
And then a 2000 Buick LeSabre that became my car.
The LHS was the 300M platform. What eventually? So like
Yeah.
The,
I don't know if the first generation was that same platform. They were comfy cars though.
Was it cab forward design?
Yes, it was one of the first, I believe, of the Chrysler Cab Forward Cloud platform.
K car. Oh man. I don't know where the hell this show went off. Why are we talking about Malibus? No one cares about Malibus.
Because they're the best car.
So, someone said, "Let's talk about Malibus." I was like, "Ooh, we had a Malibu once."
But yours is interesting and
was a
therefore
good Malibu.
irrelevant.
The
So
only one we had interesting was a '66 Malibu.
That's
say,
pretty interesting.
you go back to
2008
it.
with a 3.6 liter V6.
Yeah, is it
Now that's
the,
a car, kids.
Oh, is it the high feature V8? V6?
It is. The 3.6 liter, 252 horsepower, 250 pound-feet of torque at 3,200 RPM.
And it is the slowest 252 horsepower I've ever driven.
Yep.
I'm not going to deny that. But between like 60 and like 80, 90, that's where it actually pulls, which is interesting.
We got an Impala with one of those engines as a rental car once, and I had.
But the Impala is shit.
Yeah, I had to double check the VIN against the specs to make sure it actually made that much power. It was that engine that made that power because it was slow and it would understeer at 5 miles an hour. It was the most terrifying handling vehicle.
Okay, no, the understeer though is the fun part.
No, it's not.
Because you'll be pulling away from the stop sign, especially now when there's ice on the ground. And then next thing you know, you're shitting yourself upside down in the ditch. You don't know how you got there. But it's amazing.
That's
Yeah.
my definition of fun.
Yeah, how to end up in a ditch at no miles
We
per
have
hour?
different
That makes no
interests.
sense. Yeah.
That's
That sounds a lot like
that's
my
fun
Buick.
to the same sort of person that drives a MR2 SW20 turbo in the rain and clutch kicks it through every corner.
Sounds a lot
Fine.
like
Have we
my-
met?
Sounds a lot like my 3400 Buick, where you just step floor it and it's like engine's making a whole bunch of noise, like rah, but you're not going anywhere very fast.
Ah, yes, the 3400 Buicks. That
Or
was
someone
only in
that-
that was only in the century, I believe. If we're talking about,
No,
early 2000s.
all-wheel drive Buick Rendezvous.
oh well, yeah, there you go.
The
4,000
Aztec.
pounds of garbage.
The Aztec
Yeah.
for people who didn't want an Aztec. The
God,
Rendezvous.
that center console was amazing, though. You could fit like
It was.
50 laptops in there.
It was. The heated seats were nice. The third row seating is nice. The ride quality is nice.
Yeah,
But it just got no power.
I mean, their benchmark for handling for it was like, let's make a crossover and make it handle like a Park Avenue,
Right?
and so they did, and it was unremarkable as hell.
Yeah, and their standard for making the handling on the Park Avenue was slightly better than a cruise ship.
Yeah.
So, you know,
And they saw that it was good, and they saw that it was comfy, rather.
yeah.
Why do we keep looping back to
I
Buicks?
don't know. I'm so sad.
Everything loops back to Buick.
Because have you ever seen a sad person with a Grand National?
Yes. Next question. I live in Iowa. Everyone's sad.
Okay, has anybody noticed what luxury cars have been missing nowadays? Like, have you ever noticed
Soft
that they sort of
suspension.
The Buick
Well, that-
3800.
Steering
too.
feel.
They don't
But
have
have you
North-
noticed that they just don't have the presence they used to?
Luxury cars? Well, I don't know. You've been rolled up on by like an A8L or a 7 Series or something, or whatever the Mercedes is, and you just kind of feel poor.
Yeah.
Well, they had a new
significant.
7 Series come up in my rear view the other day, and until it passed me, I didn't realize it was a 7 Series. I just thought it was a 3 Series.
Honestly, I think the big Caddies and the big Audis have the most presence.
Yeah, like
That's-
the Audis still have presence,
The S-Class
but the big ones,
has a real presence too, I think. It's a
Yeah.
gorgeous, huge car.
Yeah, they're
Which-
big, but honestly, the styling doesn't make the styling isn't big. It's a big car with not huge styling.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think they're just super clean. I think that's the difference. Modern design is thankfully moving away from being so ostentatious, which is good.
Yeah.
So
You know
Um,
what has presence? The 2017 Mazda Miata RF.
no,
Or 2008 Malibu.
yeah, that has real presence.
Nothing has presence.
Have you ever seen me drive up to you with a Malibu, though? I mean, if anyone can give that car presence,
I'm actually honestly surprised it's still on the road, to be honest.
No, you know what had
It-
presence? Pontiac had presence.
Yeah,
yeah,
damn
until
right
they
they did.
in high school parking lots, because it's the only place you find them anymore.
It had presence, but it has no present. So
Excuse me, you see it in my parking lot.
I'm sorry. If I had a choice to go look at a Pontiac or to look at any like Chevy, you know, I'm talking about shared platforms here amongst the two. I think Pontiac, I've always felt like Pontiac made the better appealing
I agree.
of the two.
I
Well,
agree.
technically, Pontiac was your excitement, the performance excitement division for
Exactly.
the longest time, and it held on to that stigma for a long time, which is a good thing. But it was also its downfall.
Yeah.
Right, but you know
the only
that's what I found mind blowing too. Is like I own a '99 Grand Prix. It's like that was the setup for the 2000 plus Monte Carlo. Like those two were the same.
Yeah, and that was when Pontiacs lost, when they finally lost most of their true unique motors, like the 455s and 400s, and started putting the olds and Chevys, and that's when it just started. That was the slow death, start of the death.
Well,
we were talking about exciting Pontiacs, and you mentioned your Grand Prix.
Yeah. Well, it had one drive shaft for a while. That was kind of fun, like one half shaft.
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
W body making.
So
power.
Did you just put a vice grip on the other one and let the differential sort it out?
No, what happened was I tore an axle boot 2 hours away from the hotel in Michigan, and I live in Wisconsin, so I had to drive around the lake.
Oh, nice.
So 2 hours away from the hotel, I got this horrible wobble, forced me over. So I pulled over, let it stabilize, took off, had to pull over about 3 more times before we got to the hotel. Got to the hotel, went to the showgrounds and back, and then right in the parking lot, sourced a jacket, the tools, had the axle out that night, new one in the morning, buttoned it up, dropped it, drove home.
Nice. Mm-hmm. I will say one point where the Pontiac styling is not as good as the other badge engineered version is with the Pontiac Solstice and the Saturn Sky, because the Sky
G6.
True.
The Sky is one of the best designs to come out of GM in that era. And I know it's a rebadged Opel, but Opel is still GM. My mother has a black base model Sky, and anytime that I'm like driving along with her in my car, I just can't help but it feels 10 years newer than it is, that exterior style.
It does, yep.
It does.
Great.
I've always favored the Sky over
Pity about the interior.
The GXP coupes were.
Oh yeah, the GM interior of the 2000s.
Gray plastic, gray plastic, gray plastic.
I think what you have to do with that,
or black, yeah.
I think what you have to do.
Very nice when it's clean.
You have to take.
I own a 2000s GM, so yeah, which is really a 90s GM, so yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I owned an 04 Saturn Ion, so I'm well versed in crappy GM plastic.
I'm sorry.
Listen, there was nowhere to go but up.
Do we need to have another intervention?
I said I owned, okay? I upgraded to a 91 Volvo, okay? That's how that worked.
That's a sidestep, if anything.
Yeah.
Actually,
it doesn't have rear suicide doors. That makes it worse.
Well, yeah. I had the sedan, so it didn't even have those. So.
Oh my goodness.
Mm-hmm. No, this is how little I gave a shit about cars back when I first started driving. I tore the brakes off a Mercury Tracer without knowing it because it had been sitting for so long that everything deteriorated and cold welded. Basically, the brake pads wore down to the plastic. The rotor went through the plastic, or the brake piston went through and hit the rotor, cold welded in a Chicago winter, and ripped off. And so after that car was destroyed, my parents took us around. I almost got a Mazda 3 Series hatchback, but apparently my dad doesn't like to pay taxes on cars. So then we went to the Saturn dealership, and he went, you can have the or you can have the Ion Redline, or you can have the Ion Sedan. I said, which one has the better speaker system? The sedan. I'll get that one. And I've been kicking myself ever since. So.
Yeah, because the Redline had those sweet 4-lobe wheel design.
Yeah.
Redline had the supercharged 2-liter.
Yeah, actually, was it a supercharged, or was I think the Saturn had a turbocharge on it in that year?
That early, it was probably supercharged. They didn't have the turbo motor till later.
This conversation is just reminding me of the Saturn SC2 regular car reviews, which is one of my favorite of the recent ones.
I reminded you of that last night. You're welcome.
Yeah, that fast talking.
Donde está el $4 tuba?
Tuba.
That whole fast talking part is just amazing.
Donkey Punch driver. Yeah, I know. Bend over and show me your hatbox. Cadence.
I watch those often when I'm hanging out at my mom's house. And the other day I showed her the interview where they interview him and show his face, and she's like, no way, that's
what he looks like?
He's
I know.
way too handsome. I'm like, right?
It's true.
He is one, yeah. He needs to come to Kansas, review the Murder Sofa.
I want him to do my Malibu, because you saw the one he did drunk.
Yeah. I can't believe he hasn't done any LeSabre or Pontiac Grand Prix.
Agreed.
Or any of those.
I would love to see
Park
some
Avenue.
basic Pontiacs.
You never.
He did finally. He did finally do a Chevy Lumina though, and I was very surprised
True.
at how positive it was.
Yeah.
Because that's another car we had when I was a kid,
Took
and
the time into consideration.
I have nothing but fond memories of that thing, and they are really hard to find nowadays.
Because they've all returned to the earth.
No, I think Cash for Clunkers took a lot of those out of existence. Same thing with Buick Roadmaster.
Yeah.
That was a Cavalier, wasn't it? The Z24 option. That was on a Cavalier, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was one in my high school. I remember when I was a senior, that some guy got his license, had a Z24 Cavalier, and thought he was really cool, parking it next to my Z28 every day.
Those Cavaliers were reasonably fun until the G-Trag transmission breaks, and then you're screwed.
Yeah.
Gatrog.
Is that how you pronounce that?
Yes.
I've never heard it said out loud, honestly.
Gatrog. Yeah.
Yeah, and then
Okay,
the 3.4.
It's German.
They kind of had to, like, grease up the engine bay in order to cram that 3.4 in there, which made working on it all sorts of fun.
Nope.
Now I have a picture of them like going down the assembly line. There's just a big tub of Vaseline.
Yeah. What's that? Engine assembly.
Uh-huh. Like, is
Speaking
this
of,
before or after the Bukkake? I'm confused.
Oh no, we've come too much full circle.
That's
Speaking
how it
of,
works. Is it's a full circle. Yeah.
That's all the GM execs.
Oh
God. Hey, that's why they bring a ruler to the boardroom meeting.
All the engineers like, oh, this will be so hard to work on later. Yes.
And that is how we
I'm
got the
fairly certain
Aztec.
that's the actual mentality that Ford has for basically everything.
What do you think they designed the C3 Corvette after?
Oh,
So this has been a great episode no one's ever going to hear, right, Ike?
no, that's not how this
This is
works.
going away before the NSA man shows up.
Nah, this is I don't edit shit. So this is good. You all have to live with this.
Oh damn!
Oh, that's nice. The hands-off approach.
I hate living with my consequences.
Son of a bitch.
Oh, God. Ford Bukkake is that needs to be a T-shirt, I think.
Is that what comes before the probe?
Or
Go ahead.
after the probe. I'm not quite sure.
No, that's an interesting car, the Ford Probe.
Yeah.
The,
It's supposed to be the Mustang.
Yeah.
I
yeah,
drove.
the failure, the Mustang failure.
Yeah.
I drove a cream puff 96 Ford Probe GT V6 manual that was like custom optioned to have the base interior, cloth seats, and windy windows, because I'm pretty sure the GT usually had power everything in leather. This one was
That's
the
a
V6.
GTS option.
I don't know. This was the V6. It was manual. It had GT badges. The VIN number said it was a GT, but it had the basic interior. So I'm assuming it was like 3 ounces lighter or whatever, insignificant
I
metric.
think it was
But
the GTS option because they did the same thing on like the 95 and I think the 96 Mustang.
oh, really? It was a really,
Yeah.
really good car to drive. It had 60,000 miles, I believe. It was a tight,
Yeah.
decent handling car. I've heard that
No,
they
in great
head
shape.
gaskets.
The probes are awesome.
Yeah. It's a cool looking shape too. I like the pillarless rear end.
Yeah, that aged well.
I'm hearing way too much zipper work going on right now.
That's the Bukkake getting started.
Unzipping and
Sorry, I'm wearing my
Bro.
headphones, so my mic is hanging down, and I just unzipped my jacket. So
Okay.
Oh, my pants came off long ago when we were talking about Buicks.
hmm
I may or may not have muted the conversation at one point and taken a piss. So
Well, so
I wasn't
far,
even sure if I muted it or not.
well, that puts you in great esteem because so far we've only had one other person actually use the restroom while being interviewed, and that was Mr. Regular. So,
Oh hey, well,
Unless you
really
want to
glad
count,
I'm
unless you
proud
want to
to be
count,
mem-
unless you want to count the last time I was interviewed, where everybody else was using my restroom.
that's true, yeah, where
So-
everyone was walking behind you. Yeah.
Obviously, what I need to do is get popular enough to be interviewed, just do the entire interview while taking a dump.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Then I
that,
think we will hit a new low.
well, no, that's what Mr. Regular was doing. I didn't know it until
Oh.
about halfway through. He's like,
That's not even surprising.
yeah, speaking of Brown, psh, I'm like, what were you doing? Like, I was taking a dump. Like, all right. I just like laughed my ass off for like 5 minutes and then went, okay, moving on. So, He's good
These
people.
bowel movements wait for no man.
It's like, I'm going to do an interview, but I got to do it number 2. So, oh, man. I
Priorities.
Yeah. Listen, I call it multitasking. It's what successful people do. That's why he is who he is, and that's why we're all just sitting around talking about, Pontiacs, I guess, or whatever the hell a W platform is. Like,
I'm incredibly successful. I have a huge collection of shit boxes.
what qualifies
And I'm
as a-
reasonably successful, so. And I have one Pontiac, so.
Am I the only person, are me and Thomas the only person here without a Chevy or a GM product?
I used to have a Jeep.
I currently do not have one.
Give it a week.
I have a Mazda and a Ford right now.
Technically, I have a Nissan in my fleet. If you want to count the girlfriend's car.
Yeah, but you have like 6 Pontiacs, or at least you have parts from 6 Pontiacs, So.
True, but I own 2.
Yeah. GM people. Has anyone ever been to the GM Nationals then, out of all the GM people? Up in
I
Carlisle?
almost went because of my buddy, who is another Grand Prix guy, was getting married to his Grand Prix girlfriend, and they were having a Grand Prix wedding, and it was pretty cool, but we were going to go down there, just money didn't line up. So
Too far for me living on the West Coast.
It's funny you say GM people because I've had more Fords than I have GM products.
Okay, so you're one of the sane people, so we can put you in that. Okay, that's fine.
Are you saying there's anything sane about Ford? The more I work on my Fords, the more I'm convinced that Ford engineers were doing copious amounts of drugs all the time.
Well, duh.
Yeah, I mean that's the 70s and 80s.
How else would they have come up with the wheel design for the '94 Mustang GT?
No, more like I took off the alternator and it was 3 bolts and each one of them was a different
each one
size.
is a different size. Yes.
And
But you
for
gotta
some
make sure you
reason,
have an alternator that was built that week, when that motor was put together that week, or that month, because the next week they changed the whole design.
yeah, and the curious omission of a panhard bar on the solid axle Mustang, Fox body in SN95. When you're driving and you take a corner, the axle goes side to side about 2 inches. It's awesome.
Yeah.
I think
Why
it was
did they
like-
do?
Camaro didn't have
How
that
did
problem
the
because we had a
Crown make
panhard bar.
panhard bar, but the SN95 didn't.
The S197, if you have the V6 with the solid, the 1P limited to 107 miles an hour, not because of aerodynamics or the engine, but because if you go any faster than that, the drive shaft explodes.
Yeah.
Fantastic!
That's called a
But
safety
by
Don't
feature.
worry.
By that
If you have an
point,
S197 that's a 6-cylinder, you just don't want to be driving that. It's terrible. My sister has one. It's just the worst.
yeah, they're not. I mean, I love the way they're styled, but that is a very poorly built car.
Yeah.
The door handles especially, because the door handle, when it breaks, and they inevitably do, the frameless door, the window will not roll down that little half inch that it needs to for the door to
And then
open.
the window shatters.
Yes, and then you either shatter the window or you tear up your window molding. And do you know how much a Ford dealership quoted me to fix the door handles?
$400.
$400 for both, yes. And I bought 2 of them off of Rock Auto for about $7. Got a can of Duplicolor spray paint, a can of Duplicolor clear, and had it done in a weekend, and it looked factory and worked fantastic. Though
Jake's definition of looked factory is
let's
very highly suspect.
take a step
Don't
back
trust
and-
that.
If you squint your eyes at 30 feet, it looks really close.
Yeah.
well, you have to be some sort of like hand origami specialist in order to replace those things, though.
Say, if it was built by Jake's factory, if that ever existed, which is a horrifying thought, then, it might look like that.
What if we just team up Jake and Thomas and whatever happens, happens?
I don't want to ever see that. That just sounds bad.
I
I
Sounds
think
really
I think
terrible.
that style build
Yeah.
happened. It was called the Chevy Vega.
Ooh.
That'll do.
The world needs more hella flush. Crap. Forgot.
No, you nailed it.
The Corvair, that's it. Hella flush Corvairs, please.
I would rock that, I think.
I'm trying to picture that in my head, and it's not as awful as it sounds like it would be.
Depending on the body style Corvair.
Second gen.
Yeah, I would rock that. That's a good looking car.
A lowered second gen would look like a spaceship with wheels.
And those things handle fantastic stock, those second gens.
Do they? I've never driven one. I would like to, though. It's on my short list.
Yeah, well, make sure it's a 4-speed car. The Power Glides are a piece of crap.
But my drag cars.
No, stock Power Glide. That's not a drag transmission. That's a big weight.
They're 2 speeds, aren't they?
They're 2 speeds, but they're not. They don't shift worth a damn.
That sounds miserable.
Because the '67 6-cylinder Camaro I flipped. It was a 250 inline 6 Power Glide, and it shifted in the second. It just fall flat on its face because it just killed the RPM. But no, the Corvair was the second generation anyway. The car after Ralph Nader's book was a well-built car. I mean, even Yanko built his Stingers off the 140 horse, the Ford Corvair, and they were a fantastic handling car where you really don't need to do much to have a superb autocross car actually on stock.
Yeah, but some of those Stingers were also V8 swapped with the differential flipped over so that they were
I don't think unless a privateer after they bought the Stinger, but no Stinger. Yanko never built a V8 car.
That sounds terrifying.
Well, I just know there was one on Jay Leno's garage a couple years back that was a V8
with the old Crown conversion. Yeah,
that show.
Yeah,
I really want a ramp side Corvair pickup.
Good luck finding one.
I know.
I
saw one pop up like a couple months ago, but the bed floor was like JB welded in place. It was like.
I swear I didn't build that.
That sounds more like something I would do. So.
That's the only downfall with the Corvair is with the rust in them. There's not much metal work or metal out there to get parts for, and being an early unibody car for Chevrolet, it's not the most pleasant to fix.
Yeah, I'd certainly love to drive one, but I've noticed this odd trend where after I wrecked my NA Miata, suddenly people don't want to let me drive their cars anymore.
Well, let's go back to that accident and what happened and why and how. Please share.
Yeah, my reaction times aren't as good as I thought, basically.
Yeah.
Once the rear end on a car with a short wheelbase starts getting loose, as it turns out, I am not adequately skilled to pull out of that.
Out of it and put it into a ditch, out of it and put it into trees. I'm unfamiliar with this story. You're going to have to elaborate.
Well,
telephone pole.
And
there you go.
And you have a Mustang now.
So what did you hit again?
This was my my first Miata. I think it was last January, 2016. I was driving through a underdevelopment neighborhood because it's Kansas and that's the only place where you can find reasonably twisty roads. And I was doing over the speed limit, but not stupid fast.
Okay, so Fast and the Furious Tokyo Drift?
I wasn't trying to drift. Definitely not. I knew better than to purposely try to drift. I was just trying to recreate the whole canyon run carving experience that people in LA get. But it was recently after we had some snow, so there was just a little bit of grit over all the roads. And this was not a very often traveled road, so it hadn't been kicked off. So I was kind of driving through the middle where it was sort of not sandy, and then a car was coming the other way, so I moved over for him while going around a corner and basically did a Scandi flick and put my car rotated a full 360 degrees, bounced over a curb, and just ever so gently shuffled into a telephone pole, just enough to mess up the bodywork. And it bent the crap out of my subframe and ball joints, but a couple new ball joints and lower control arms, and I had it back on the road.
Did you
that
try to
sounds
sell
like
a
mine,
Camaro?
actually.
Because I had a guy tell me when I looked at the Camaro once that he just gently hit a pole.
That's the
whole
part that
bag.
annoys me, is gently hitting the pole. Like, it wasn't hard enough to, total the car or anything, but it couldn't have been that little bit where I didn't hit the pole at all.
I just
that
like
sounds
This
the,
is how
my
the
accident
Turbo
back in
Miata
the
was
day.
born.
Yes, and so at this point, I was like, well, the car is not drivable. I don't want to fix it. I'm pissed off with it. So then I bought, that's when I bought my V6 Mustang, thinking, oh, this is a newer car. It's 2005. This is the most modern thing I've owned. This will be reliable.
yeah.
I
I
financed that
can't
thing.
drive stuff without putting it into a curve. You know what? I should get a car notorious for running over crowds of people. That seems like a perfect combination.
This was long before that, and it was a V6. I didn't buy it because it was a Mustang. I bought it because it was available and it was modern. I was like, this doesn't have much power. It'll be, a reasonably comfortable daily, and it'll free up my Miata for me to go absolutely nuts and slap a turbo on it. So I went to my friend, and we found the turbocharger out of a Mitsubishi 3000 GT VR4. I believe it was the rear. And he gave me that, and he let me use his shop, and I welded together a exhaust manifold and the world's most hideous turbo downpipe, and put it on that Miata with the stock ECU. Just upgraded the injectors to those from a 1.8, rerouted some of the intake tubing, and used a radiator hose as intake pipe, and I think I was less than $400 into the whole thing. And it made 8 pounds of boost on a stock ECU. And there was no intercooler. It was just straight piped in, sort of like the old supercharger kits were, is what I was basing it off of, because those superchargers never had any tunes or anything. It was just a rising rate fuel pressure regulator and bigger injectors, and you're good to go. So it should have been a reliable 8 pounds of boost, and it was quick. Based on the power numbers that the supercharged ones put down, it was probably peaking at about 170 wheel horsepower in a first-gen Miata, which is significant over the 110 wheel horsepower that you get stock. And then I sold it because I got bored and was sick of looking at it. And I got my second-gen Miata, which is a better car in every conceivable way.
But the headlights don't pop up.
No, they don't, but it drives, and it's reliable, and it's got a stock powertrain.
But the headlights don't pop up.
I get in it, and it starts, and it gets me to work, and I haven't had to do any real maintenance to it in months.
Okay.
I
but-
have ridden in
don't
both
get
of these
stuck up.
cars. Do not hate on him for getting the NB. My God, it is so much better. Just
Yeah, and the headlights never get stuck in the up position on an MD. which is fit.
Oh, yeah, that was a fun problem. One time I had the wiring harness get caught in the headlight mechanism. I was like, why do my fuses keep blowing, and why don't my headlights work, and why don't they go up or down?
You
And
know
then
what? You need vacuum powered like my Camaro.
No, I don't. Nobody needs that. I don't wish that on anybody.
It could be
Pop-up-
worse. It
pop-up
could be one of
headlights
those
in general.
Mercedes
No.
Benzes with those
No.
hydraulic door locks.
Oh, yeah. Don't those run at some incredible pressure that could
Oh
cut
yeah,
metal?
you'll slice right through your arm if you disarm it properly. Or
God,
free
that
it
sounds
properly.
safe.
Yeah.
Let's put that in a car. That sounds like a
I am-
great idea.
So
Yeah.
happy with
This is the
On the
same
Miata, should done
company that put
Should've-
explosive bolts in as a quote safety feature. So
Oh, yeah.
They should have done like the Opal, where it's just mechanical, just a hard, long rod all the way to pull it.
Hard
lever.
long
hard
rod.
Hard, and then pop.
Stiff,
and,
hard, long
put-
rung that you grab and twist and turn and pull and push
Yep.
until stuff
Bop it.
spins and
Mhm.
yeah, twist it, bop it, pull it.
And boom, Bukaki.
There's our second lap of the full circle.
it's how we do.
Yeah,
see?
the date, we got a while. The 500's tomorrow.
Yeah. Is it tomorrow? Or I guess
Yeah,
it's technically yesterday if you're listening to this. So that's how that works. Magic, time warp, weird shit. Or technically,
we are wizards.
yes. Mhm.
Not
Well,
really.
Thomas is a wizard of suspension. That's pretty much all I've learned this whole episode.
No, he's not.
No,
Wizard of
it's not.
suspension
He put on springs.
Yeah.
from a
Does that make me-
C10.
Does that make me the
Really not
Grandmaster Flash of
You could do
suspension?
that if you were
I mean,
I
the
know,
only
12 years old and had half a brain.
he's the wrong kind of wizard. He's like a grand wizard in the worst way
Yeah.
possible.
Oh dear
Of
God.
suspension.
Okay.
The
And
suspension KKK. We've reached
Yeah.
a new low.
Yeah. I mean, that's the only wizard that we can classify him as. So
They're gonna take those McPherson struts and hang them from trees.
Stop this at 5 o'clock.
All right. I think on that terrible
so
note,
busy.
we're gonna go
and it's
ahead.
not that fun.
Having and taking a bite in the hand.
Is someone getting yelled at right
Good.
now? Is that what's going on?
My girlfriend's telling me about her day.
Okay. Well, how was her day? Let us know. What's going on? She took a bite at
She
5
got-
o'clock? Yeah.
Hi,
She got
Michaela.
Subway and she brought me Mountain Dew. So
Guys, this might take a while because when she gets home, she'll download about 8 hours of information. So,
Who said that?
leave while you can.
Oh crap! She can hear us. Yeah.
She's got murder in her eyes and a knife in her hands.
You wish I only
And I'm
Also
glad I'm on the
footlong
West
Subway,
Coast.
apparently.
And the show has reached a new level. Did you hear the thing about the McPherson
I had
struts?
8 hours of crazy today.
Yeah.
Well, have my nasty socket face.
Oh,
Oh God.
all right. We're gonna end the show here. Well, we're end with one final question to everyone. So, I want to come up with something a little controversial because why not at this point?
I think
Yeah, why
I
not?
think we have.
Yeah. You can wipe one car out of existence, but you have to wipe out all make and all
Panther.
model of that car.
Panther platform.
Yep. Panther platform.
Panther
They're all
platform.
gone.
So what are the cops going to drive then? Don't say Malibu.
Literally Buick LeSabres.
Caprices.
Smart
Chevy
cars.
SSs. The SS gets to stay in production because they have to drive Caprices now.
Hmm. Yeah, but see,
Done.
then here's the
Holden of
issue.
Australia doesn't die.
But then
There you
you're
go.
still stuck behind Priuses and RAV4s at stoplights.
I
Is
don't
it worth
care.
that?
The
Okay.
Panther's gone.
Mm,
Yep.
mm.
Done.
I'm sensing.
Wait, can I change mine to all VWs?
Yeah, that's a good one too.
Yeah.
Does that
I'll
include
give you
Porsches,
that.
the glorified Volkswagen?
I guess it would
No.
have to at that point because
Yeah.
what else are you going to base it on? I mean, they're basically just Beetles, so let's just be honest here.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And then the
I
Corvette
was
would
I was
be really
mostly
good.
referring. I was mostly
Yeah.
referring to like the Mark IV Jettas and stuff.
Yeah.
Without that, there'd
Mostly
be no
because-
Dieselgate. So there's that.
Yeah, but the owners are insufferable.
This is
Well,
also
then
true.
go
And
that
you
route.
have to
Just
use
get rid of
so
all the
many-
WRXs and STIs.
I'm
Ugh.
convinced that Volkswagen has a game where it's like, how many specialty tools can we incorporate into the changing of this part?
Well, what gets me is that this is something that I've heard from multiple owners. Like, I've got a Volkswagen. I modified it. It's fast now in a straight line, but it brakes all the time. It's pretty horrible. And then there's like a pause, and they're like, I'm going to buy another one as a daily driver because this one is always braking.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
This is 3 people so far I've heard that exact conversation with.
Hold on, real fast, Johnny. Why did you buy your second Pontiac?
because my first one's always break. No, my first one's uncomfortable to drive, and it's too pretty to go daily driving in. So
I was just thinking that it's like I've heard this story somewhere before. Now, I get removing the VW drivers because of that thing. I don't know. Any other opinions out there before we go about which we should get
I'd
rid
wipe
of?
out the Taurus. Every
Aw.
Taurus.
I love the Taurus. They're so comfy and they're so old.
That's the
manly.
first car I ever drove.
Yeah.
You shouldn't.
The Vulcan is an utterly spiteful thing in the nose of one of those. The fuel pumps are constantly going. Sludge is a real issue with the 3-liter Duratax. They're not very well thought out. They're not very quick. They're not very economical. They're not very safe.
But the Yamaha-powered show existed, so your argument is invalid.
Yeah, but if the Taurus didn't exist, the Yamaha engine would have gone into like a sports car or something, and then that would have actually been good. So,
Wait.
I don't know.
I think I know how to convince Thomas that it should exist. Thomas, I'm pretty sure S10 springs can go in the back of a Taurus.
what spring?
Oh.
No, it's not worth it.
It's not worth it.
I honestly kind of like the 24-valve Taurus.
Yeah.
It's reasonably decent to drive.
It's
decent to drive. It's just my buddies. I have several buddies who have had one, and the least they've spent on it in repairs is about $600, and that was the cheapest.
Is that Canadian dollars or real dollars?
That's real dollars, because all of the parts they bought online in U.S. dollars.
Ah.
Yeah, well, my buddy's friend's best buddy's cousin has one, and they've spent $0, and it'll run 12s
Boom.
in the half mile.
Yeah.
Did they top off
I
half the
hate
car?
my buddies always bumming rides off of me because their Tauruses are breaking.
Ah,
Have you guys seen?
Get better
so
friends.
you don't want to get rid of the car, you just want to get rid of your friends. That's what it is.
Yeah.
I want to get rid
Wow.
of the cars so they have their own.
This is a really
Yeah.
roundabout way of
And that-
saying you want to murder.
Yeah. No, they're good
This
people.
has opened up a whole new question of, I didn't think Thomas had friends, so I don't know how
Ooh.
this is some kind of weird hole we've fallen down.
I mean, we're talking about Tauruses, though.
It's the mirror universe.
The current generation Taurus is awful. It's a spiteful, hateful machine that's poorly
Yeah.
screwed together and enormous with very little interior space for how big it is. I like the previous, not the previous gen, the one before the Ford 500. I kind of like that gen.
The SHO style?
No.
No.
Well, the second gen SHO.
Yeah.
Made it.
Have you guys seen Mark's Sable on Opposite Lock? It's a black Mercury Sable that's lowered.
It's well done.
It is very well done. I actually rather like it.
It's cool looking.
He's spent silly amounts of money for what it is, but
I know, but
at
it
least he
looks so
doesn't
good.
have any delusions about it. That's the thing that gets me is I'm fine with stupid mods as long as the owner has not slipped into some delusion that what they are creating is objectively excellent or the best. You know, somebody throws a bunch of money at a crap can just because it makes them happy, good for them. But if somebody
like I
goes
made
and
my
throws
car
a bunch
work
of
because
money
I
at a
enjoy
crap
it.
can because they think they're going to roll on Lamborghinis, then that person
And mods
needs
add value.
and think that either the mods add value or that they're genuinely making something that is a legit performance machine.
When would mods ever add value?
Hey
unless
man,
it's like
when
a
you add them
reality
GTR
fight?
badges on everything, 1,000 horsepower.
I think one mod
Actually-
would add value to a car is if I swapped a 5.0 into my Mustang. That would probably add more
Yeah.
value than it would cost.
Or
Actually,
if you
it's
just
been
took
proven.
the engine out of your Mustang, it would add
Yeah,
value.
my Mustang would probably be worth more without an engine because then it'd be a notchback
Or a
shell.
Fox Roller, not.
It has been proven that some mods do increase the value, such as like in case of like Ferraris back in the recall days. If you had the mods that corrected those recalls or whatever, that actually increased the value of the car.
But they
Well,
don't increase the value of the car by the value of whatever was spent on the mod.
But not necessarily.
I
I'm
don't
just
consider
saying-
a repair to be a modification.
Yeah, I'm just saying, if S10
Yeah.
springs don't add value, I don't know what will.
Trust me, I've
Super
lowered
print
the
seat
value of that
covers.
thing. The book value is probably about $750, and it's currently probably worth about.
Negative $250.
What's current scrap going for?
Ooh,
No, it'd be below that.
no.
Yeah.
Remember a while ago, Doug DeMuro was working when he was still working at Jalopnik, and he had that like post the value of your car and see who can get the lowest one.
Yeah.
My '91 Volvo actually had a negative value.
What?
Yeah, like
How?
it was negative $100 if I went to trade it in.
I did that. Mine was zero.
Yeah.
The Crown Vic. So
Because I don't know why they thought the Volvo was not worth much, but like the paint on that thing's awful. The interior is basically gone. There's like nothing to it. So I went through the little thing they had, and like my car actually was worth negative money. So me keeping the car technically is worth. I'm saving money because otherwise, if I sold it, I'd have to pay someone to take it. So
I was incredibly pleased when I went to a dealership to test drive a car, and just for shits and giggles, I had them get me a quote for what I'd get traded for my 2002 Miata, and the amount that they would give me is actually exactly what I paid for it.
Oh,
That's nice.
Dealer trade-in, so private party probably more.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's nice.
You did
when
good
can
on
buy
that
it.
Miata.
It's nice when you can buy a car, put 20,000 miles on, and just get the exact same back out of it.
Yeah, one thing I've learned is don't buy a car that's been sitting for a long time. Low
Yeah,
miles.
you didn't need to learn that. You could have asked one of us.
Yeah, well, I mean, a lot of people consider low miles to be the only thing that matters, but I'd rather a car that's been driven regularly than a cream puff that's been sitting for an eternity.
You know, it
And,
depends on like the mileage. You know, low miles if it's driven, yearly. It's not like, oh, I put 2,000 miles on in '86 and it hasn't been moved since.
I don't know. Anybody who puts mods on their car that aren't strictly for their own enjoyment is delusion.
A mechanic.
all right. Well, we're 2 hours into this thing at this point, so I'm going to go ahead and call it. So I'll give
you sure you're not going to edit this?
No, I refuse. We'll give everyone a chance to plug something before we go. So we'll start with Jake. So since he joined us.
Why?
last.
Plug something. Fastnotloud.com. We never update it, but it exists.
That's the tagline.
Yay.
Caleb.
Oh, my designer line of condoms.
What's
It's
it
just
called and what
hollow-
are the features?
It's a hollowed out cucumber. I take a Dremel and just drill out the inside.
It's organic.
Buy
I'll
it,
take a case.
buy it all Whole Foods
Do
Market.
they come in extra large?
3 centimeter.
In fairness, you should use pickles because the bumps are for her pleasure.
Y'all should see the picture it's giving me right now.
Thomas, something. Get us off this line of questions.
Alrighty, I'll be starting up the actual season 1 of my YouTube channel, G_body_man. If you want to check it out, that'd be great.
All right.
Hopefully we'll have new stuff up in the coming weeks.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Dalton.
My YouTube is Camaro Boy 1968 SS. I'm now actually posting some new videos finally, and the Portland Roaster Show is coming up in 2 weeks.
Portland. You guys got good beer. Blake.
We got a lot of beer.
Yeah, I'm B-Man76 on Oppo, but I also recently started a Redbubble page, BT76 Design, and I'm taking some of those silhouette designs that I did back in the summer and putting them up there as things you can buy on T-shirts and pillow covers and all kinds of stuff. So that's starting up, and yeah, that's on Redbubble. So
Red vegetable.
And John.
yeah, hey, your turnip's up there.
Yay.
All right.
I
You
want
can,
t-shirts.
You can find Blown Pistons at on Spreaker or at BadHabitsNetwork.net. If anybody is around the Wisconsin area, I do professional auto detailing. I just opened up my shop. That's Attention for Detail LLC on Facebook. It's attentionfordetail.com. So, yeah.
It's like a bukkake of clean all over your car.
Actually, you have
Actually,
a foam cannon. You
I
know?
do. I use a foam cannon, and if you
Man, you're going to have to pay Ike for the advertising score he just got you.
right,
That's going on the business card.
You got your choice but to use that.
bukkake washes.
That's the quote. For...
All right. All right. Thanks everyone for listening. If you made it this far, thank you so
And
much.
sorry. I'm
Do we
so
have
sorry.
medals to give people
Please
if
don't
they
come
didn't
for
score?
me.
Oh man, what was that?
I'm actually a good person.
That's the
Yeah,
favorite.
I get that too.
All right. So this has been Thomas's intervention. I mean, the Untitled Car Show. Whatever my usual tagline it is to get out of here. I'll be right back, everyone, to sign off the show. All right. And so that was a thing. So thanks, everyone, so much for listening. If you enjoyed the show, make sure you tell a friend, loved one, or coworker. You can find the show at Untitled Car Show on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. I'm most often on Twitter, so follow me there. You can follow Ryan West at Ryanator122. Yeah, and everyone listening, thank you so much for listening. Have a good night. Have a good evening. Wherever you are, whatever time it is there, thank you so much for listening. Be safe out there.